The collapse of the Western Roman Empire, a dramatic and transformative event in world history, was not the result of one catastrophic moment, but rather the culmination of centuries of internal decay, external pressures, and structural failures. At its peak, the Roman Empire was a vast and unparalleled civilization that controlled much of Europe, the Near East, and North Africa. Yet by 476 CE, the western half of the empire had fallen into disarray, ushering in the Middle Ages and forever changing the course of history. To understand the fall of the Western Roman Empire, one must first appreciate the scale and power it once commanded. By the 2nd century CE, Rome controlled a sprawling territory that stretched from the British Isles to the deserts of Egypt, and from the Atlantic Ocean to the Persian Gulf. Its military was unmatched, its cities grand, and its culture influential. But beneath this veneer of strength and grandeur, there were deep-seated issues that over time would become insurmountable. The seeds of Rome's downfall were sown in the 3rd century CE. This period, known as the crisis of the 3rd century, saw the empire nearly collapse under the weight of military defeats, political instability, economic strife, and widespread disease. Between 235 and 284 CE, Rome suffered from constant civil wars and power struggles as more than 20 men claimed the imperial throne, often through force. This constant turnover of rulers created an atmosphere of chaos and uncertainty, weakening the central government and eroding the public's trust in the empire's ability to maintain order. During this period, the Roman economy also began to falter. Rome had long relied on a system of conquest to fuel its economy, using the wealth and slaves gained from expansion to support its infrastructure and military. However, by the 3rd century, the empire had reached its geographical limits, and the flow of wealth from new conquests slowed. At the same time, inflation soared due to the debasement of the Roman currency, which emperors had resorted to in order to pay the legions and fund increasingly expensive wars. The empire's vast network of roads, aqueducts, and cities, once a source of pride, began to deteriorate as funds to maintain them dwindled. Heavy taxation further burdened the populace, particularly the lower classes, leading to widespread unrest. One of the most significant reforms aimed at stabilizing the empire came under the reign of Emperor Diocletian in 284 CE. Recognizing that the Roman Empire was simply too large and unwieldy for a single ruler to manage effectively, Diocletian divided the empire into two halves. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital at Byzantium, later Constantinople, and the Western Roman Empire, centered in Rome and later Ravenna. This division allowed for more localized governance and helped to manage the empire's vast and diverse territories. The eastern half, richer and more defensible, would go on to thrive for nearly another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire. But the western half, weakened by invasions and internal strife, would struggle to survive. The division of the empire also exposed the growing disparity between the East and West. The Eastern Roman Empire, benefiting from its control of key trade routes and the wealth of the Eastern Mediterranean, became the more prosperous and stable half. Meanwhile, the Western Roman Empire, with its less fertile lands and exposed borders, faced constant threats from barbarian tribes. This east-west divide would become a crucial factor in the eventual fall of the western half of the empire. As the 4th century progressed, the Western Roman Empire found itself increasingly vulnerable to external threats. The Roman military, once the backbone of the empire, had become less effective. The professional legions that had once been composed primarily of Roman citizens were now filled with foreign mercenaries, many of whom came from the very barbarian tribes that threatened the empire's borders. These mercenaries were often loyal to their own tribal leaders rather than to Rome, and their presence weakened the cohesion and discipline of the Roman army. One of the most significant external pressures on the Western Roman Empire came from the migration of the Huns, a fierce and nomadic people from Central Asia. The Huns, under their leader Attila, swept across Europe in the 4th and 5th centuries, displacing other barbarian groups and causing widespread chaos. In particular, the arrival of the Huns forced many Germanic tribes, such as the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, and Vandals, to seek refuge within the borders of the Roman Empire. In 376 CE, the Visigoths, fleeing the Huns, crossed the Danube River and entered Roman territory. Initially, the Romans allowed the Visigoths to settle as refugees, but they were treated poorly by Roman officials, leading to a rebellion. This culminated in the Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE, where the Visigoths decisively defeated the Roman army and killed Emperor Valens. The battle was a devastating loss for Rome and marked a turning point in its ability to defend its borders. From that moment on, the empire was no longer able to keep the barbarian tribes at bay. The Visigoths continued to be a major force within the Roman Empire. In 410 CE, under their king Alaric, they sacked the city of Rome, the first time in 800 years that the city had fallen to a foreign enemy. Although Rome was no longer the political capital of the empire, its symbolic importance was immense. The sack of Rome sent shockwaves through the Roman world, demonstrating that the empire was no longer invulnerable. The Visigoths eventually moved on to establish a kingdom in what is now Spain, but their sack of Rome marked the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. As the Western Roman Empire's military faltered, its economy continued to deteriorate. The loss of key provinces, particularly in North Africa, which had supplied much of Rome's grain, led to food shortages and further economic strain. In 455 CE, the Vandals, another Germanic tribe, sacked Rome again. This time, the destruction was even more thorough, as the Vandals looted the city and took many of its treasures back to their kingdom in North Africa. By the mid-5th century, the Western Roman Empire was a shadow of its former self. Its territories had been reduced to Italy, parts of Gaul, and a few scattered outposts. The empire was no longer governed by strong emperors, but by barbarian generals who wielded the real power behind the throne. One such general was Flavius Ricimer, a Germanic commander who acted as kingmaker, controlling a series of puppet emperors. The final blow came in 476 CE, when the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the barbarian chieftain Odoacer. Odoacer, rather than taking the imperial title for himself, declared himself king of Italy and sent the imperial regalia to Constantinople, signalling the end of the Western Roman Empire. Romulus Augustulus, little more than a boy, was sent into retirement, and with his removal, the 1,000-year history of Rome as a centre of imperial power came to an end. While 476 CE is traditionally seen as the date of the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the reality is that the empire had been in a state of decline for centuries. The fall was not the result of a single event, but rather a process of gradual disintegration caused by internal weaknesses and external pressures. The Western Roman Empire's collapse was a complex and multifaceted event, shaped by political corruption, military failure, economic collapse, and the relentless pressure of barbarian invasions. In the wake of Rome's fall, Europe entered a period known as the Dark Ages. The political and social structures that had once unified the Mediterranean world under Roman rule disintegrated, and the western half of the former empire fragmented into a patchwork of barbarian kingdoms. These kingdoms, ruled by tribes such as the Franks, Visigoths, Ostrogoths and Vandals, would form the foundation of medieval Europe. While the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive for centuries, the West would not see the re-emergence of a unified political entity until the rise of the Holy Roman Empire in the 9th century. The legacy of the Western Roman Empire, however, endured in many ways. Roman law, language and culture had a profound influence on the development of medieval Europe. The Roman Catholic Church, which had become closely intertwined with the empire, survived the fall and became a dominant force in European politics and society. Latin, the language of Rome, remained the language of learning and the Church throughout the Middle Ages, and Roman architectural and engineering innovations continued to be used long after the empire's collapse. Perhaps most importantly, the idea of Rome as a unifying force, a bastion of civilization and order, persisted long after the empire itself had fallen. Even as the Western Roman Empire lay in ruins, the memory of its grandeur and power inspired later generations. The Holy Roman Empire, founded by Charlemagne in the 9th century, sought to revive the glory of Rome, and the title of Roman Emperor continued to carry weight in European politics for centuries to come. In the end, the fall of the Western Roman Empire was not the end of civilization, but rather the beginning of a new chapter in world history. The empire's collapse paved the way for the rise of medieval Europe, and its legacy would continue to shape the course of history for centuries to come.